I love the CNN headline on this, by the way. So Trump signs executive order establishing specialized. You can hear the breathlessness that they're writing.
Anxiety is
National Guard units. Yeah. How many SSRIs went into this?
You know, they wanted to put stormtroopers there.
You know, they're so close to writing storm. And look at the graphic, right? Just this. Oh my gosh, look at them just
the local
marching
Walgreens
along,
is just totally out of
like
Xanax.
Soldiers. You know, so specialized units. Specifically trained and equipped to deal with public order issues. So they're talking about specific units, specialized units of what. Okay, I understand what's in the first paragraph. I already understand what they're talking about. So specialized units. They're talking about crowd control. They're talking about crowd control units. All right, don't like just. It's so obvious that they could use, and we say this every day, but they could obviously have just said it's crowd control units. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at people who are designed. I believe, and any Army guys in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's a version of the military police. I think it's an MP designator that goes in under that, and then it's riot control basically, and who has that because they have the ones who have training for like law enforcement. They have a little bit more training in terms of how to deal with those situations. And that's what they're sending in. So specialized units. It sounds so much scarier when you say it that way. But also, and this is what they're losing their mind about, they're losing their mind that Trump is saying 19 more cities, potentially Chicago. Andrew, what do you think?
Well, I saw Newscomb, and he was going to town about this and saying that it's all a ploy by Trump in order to steal the midterm elections. And that's why they're mobilizing troops all over the place. Now, this, of course, was carryover from his massive embarrassment when his little speech got raided by ICE, which was hilarious. Right? It was hilarious. But this is what they're all upset about. The truth is that there used to be an ongoing meme that we would lose more people in Chicago in a day than we did in the Afghanistan war.
During the war on terror, I remember this.
And it's true. That's been going on. Now, people forget. Go back to when Trump gave his very first victory speech. You remember all the commentators were saying it's about strength because he said, American carnage, the days of American carnage are over. So this shouldn't be a surprise to people. Trump's been talking about doing this for a long time. He talked about doing it when he was running the first time. He talked about possibly mobilizing the military to go into these places where we're losing more people than we were in legitimate wars. So I think it's a good idea. I would like to see more troops.
I'm curious how many of the 19 cities in question, how many of them have Democrat mayors?
Probably all of them.
Yeah. I mean,
so they asked him this question in the Oval Office earlier today, and they said, are you going to be sending troops to red cities? And he just gives the reporter a look like, what red cities? Does anyone know any reds? Can we name these red cities? Have you heard of these red cities? There are no red cities. And even in some of the large cities where you may nominally have a Republican mayor or, New York's got an independent right now, like this city is still blue. It's still very, very blue. The point being is they've allowed that, blueness or whatever, the liberalism and soft on crime approach because we have to consider the rights and the interests of the criminal actually coming before the rights of tourists, citizens, children, family, thinking about New York, but any of those people who actually have much more of a right to those streets than the criminal does.
Well, look at like San Francisco. Look at many of these places where you have junkies in the street in a zombie-like state. You guys remember seeing all those videos?
Of course.
They're going through, they're scanning them, and these guys are just hanging there like it's like it's Night of the Living Dead.
I'm from the Philly area, and we've got a place like that called Kensington, and they actually refer to it now as Kensington Beach. And you can go on Instagram and find like Kensington Beach accounts or whatever, and you can get like T-shirts that say Kensington Beach because there are so many people laying out that it looks like they're at the beach because it looks like they're suntanning or something.
Well, let me ask you something. Don't you consider it? I know it's not constitutional treason, but in your mind, isn't it somewhat treasonous that the mayors of these cities and governors of these states essentially are soft on crime in order to placate a minority a minority group whose votes they want. It's part of them bribing the electorate, right? And so the idea that, hey, I'm going to send the military in because you won't do your job, which we saw during the California riots. I watched them every single night live, covered them on multiple cameras. We were watching them get into fights with the police, burning the squad cars, setting fires, we would call it dumpster mode, the next dumpster mode, when they would put the dumpsters up and start fighting, right? They told the police, obviously, to stand down. We were watching it. They told them, stand down, don't do anything, right? Let them do what they're doing until Trump sent in the Marines. And that put a stop to it. And their little day of rage didn't really go off as well as they had hoped because there was some military there taking care of it. And it's like, at some point, we're going to have to look at this and say, if these guys won't enforce the laws, and we're losing, 4, 6, 10, 12, 16 people a day, eventually someone's going to have to put an end to the carnage.
How much do you think that it's about the voters in the specific metropolitan areas or whatever, and versus how much do you think it's about actually placating people in a PR move? Because I feel like
it's both.
Because I feel like
it's not one's not excluding the other. The thing is Democrats work in unison for national campaign PR. You're right about that. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. But you still also have your localized elections. And the truth is that they are pandering to minority groups as much as possible for lighter sentences, things like this. So they seem to want to move towards rehabilitation, even though there's no rehabilitation going on.
In Philadelphia, no matter how bad the murder rate has gotten, Larry Krasner, the Soros DA, just keeps getting reelected over and over and over. So I think this speaks to what you're saying, that it's in a very odd way of putting it, they keep voting for murder.
Wouldn't that be a lot of that have to do with outside money and outside influence, though?
Yeah, NGOs, of course. NGOs are involved.
Well, he's a Soros DA.
Yeah.
NGOs are always involved in this. You know what I mean? But the question here, what we're moving down to is this. If these people will not stop this, if these Democrats won't stop it, how does it get stopped?
Part of the reason why I asked that and I push back on the idea is just because you see so many videos coming out of D.C. where people that are actual residents that are like, this is great. I can drive around in my car with the window open in the summer and I don't feel like I'm going to get carjacked. I don't feel like blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of people that are posting these things on the internet saying, look, it's much safer. And I know that the people that are most upset about crime in an area are the people that live there. So I feel like I'm not that I've done any kind of surveys or deep dive on this.
This doesn't feel like pushback. This feels like
okay, so fine. But I just I wanted to unpack
I understand what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
What you're highlighting is that there is a disconnect between the actual experience and the interests of the citizens and the preference reflected.
Yeah, if they're getting good results from this policy, why don't they vote for this policy when they have the chance?
Well, also the people that are getting disenfranchised the most when these cities fall apart is the people in the suburbs, because those are the descendants of people that were pushed out of those cities a few decades back.
Well, I wanted to ask you, an incredible point, but I also want to ask you about your conversation with Nick Sortor. So you were talking about D.C. Mm-hmm. So obviously D.C. now, the president could do more there. It's a federal district. It's not a state. It is a federal city. So he can do more. But that being said, it'll give us, I think, some clue as to the sort of things that we might be seeing in Chicago and these other 19 cities.
Yeah. I mean, the point he made was obviously there's not a clear pathway. Like, for example, to Chicago, he said something that could be a possibility to make this work would be if the Cook County sheriff deputized federal agents. But once again, that all depends on who the sheriff is of the county.
Well, it still also comes down to, so the way I understand most of it is that it still comes down to if you're in so federal agents can always obviously be involved in enforcement of federal law. So if you can find a nexus, like say, I don't know, gun trafficking or something, or ATF, where they're breaking gun laws.
Yeah, interstate commerce.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden.
Well, just interstate, like the second you go interstate, it becomes federal, right?
Right.
So the second the gun leaves the border, now it's a federal crime. And now they can get involved. And so that's one reasonable pathway. The truth is though, is like what I saw during those riots was just the show of force calmed things way down. Not at first. At first, people wanted to make an example of it, and so they wanted to go fight with the Marines, but that didn't last very long. And it did seem like it calmed that entire order down very, very quickly. We were very disappointed, the big heyday. We all had our popcorn, we all had our beer. We were live. I was there with the audience, and we're like, this is it, boys. We're finally going to watch them get wrecked in the streets. This is going to be, and they just stood down. And it's because the Marines were there.
It was beyond that. It was like a demoralization effect because they realized, there's 3 more years of this. We're not going to stop this.
Yeah, we're not going to stop this.
Huge change from the summer of love where they felt like, okay, we have our foot on the gas and there's a year left.
The counter PR, like to your point, the counter PR is the progressives are going to say, these are Nazi stormtroopers who are coming in from a fascist president, and the whole idea is to seize power. They can't tell you the pathway to that, though, right? Because there is no pathway. There's no pathway to how President Trump mobilizes the Guard for crime-ridden areas and then seizes control of the country. They can never tell you that part of it because they're just making it up. The truth is that this country's been riddled. Some of these places have been riddled so badly, like you said, you can't have your window open. There's places my wife won't go. She's not going to go any of those places in some of these major cities, and that's in Michigan. Chicago's not that far away. And yeah, man, they're taking people out there left and right.
Tate makes a point frequently that we're kind of a vibes-based country, like the United States really, really kind of votes and acts based on how they feel far less than actual, evidence or whatever. And I think he's right. And I think that it works both for the right and for the left. Like the left has the vibe that Donald Trump is this authoritarian. And look, anything that they can come up with that confirms their feelings or how they, their preconceived notions, they're going to say, look, this is it. This is all the, how many times have you seen someone on the left write a think piece about how bad Donald Trump is and how he's a Nazi and stuff. And it doesn't matter what the policy is. Everything confirms their preconceived notion.
Yeah, I agree with that. So you're talking about people giving into intuition over reason and logic. Yeah, I understand. But you still have to temper one of the best ways to temper that PR is with
They don't
logic.
have to do shit.
Well, they don't have to. But the appeal to the electorate is we still do have to use some sort of reason here. And I always ask progressives the same thing. Show me the path. Show me the path for how Donald Trump mobilizes the military to seize control of the country. First of all, there's no way generals would ever go for that in a million years, or commanding officers or anybody else. They're simply going in to try to do something about these crime-ridden areas, which is a thing Trump talked about in his first term on his very first speech when he said American carnage is over. He's been wanting to do this for a long time. So I don't even know what they're freaking out about.
I would even go a step further. I've been kind of talking about this thing behind the scenes. I wrote this piece not too long ago talking about how Trump is a city conservative and that city conservatives are just functionally and fundamentally different from rural conservatives. And people are saying like, oh, are you saying they're better? No. I'm not saying anyone's better
They're
or
informed
worse.
differently.
It's just that, they're formed differently. It's that Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, the MAGA movement was born on a golden escalator on Fifth Avenue, New York City, which is just fundamentally different than sort of the George W. Bush conservatism, which evokes this kind of, like a small town aesthetic and a pickup truck and a six pack. And those are all cool things, but they're just fundamentally different. And whereas the city conservative, it really is more law and order focused. And I actually remember Trump
it has to
mentioning
be.
once. Yeah, he mentions once that it was the Freddie Gray riots back in 2015, and Melania, when they were burning Baltimore down, and Melania was watching that with him, and she said, and he'd been kind of kicking around, okay, 2016, do I want to run? He hadn't in 12, and they were watching that on TV, and her turning to him and just saying, look at this, you have to run. And it was those images of the breakdown of law and order, because in order for a city to be a city, right, in order for a city to be formed, it must be, it has to be red coded, right, at the very beginning, or else, I'm sorry, like the libs, you're not going to build a city. Like you never will. It's not going to happen. And you need to have those laws to establish that order from the chaos to begin with, or else you're just going to get chaos, which is what we have now. And so the city conservative is basically formed and activated by having all of that stolen from them, and they're fighting to get it back rather than conserving.
Yeah, but isn't what's happened? What usually happens here is when they send troops or anything like this, or even feds to come in and try to put an end to carnage going on in a major city, you have small splinter cell groups like Antifa, things like this, who are NGO funded, even though we can't seem to find the NGOs. They're NGO funded. don't they go in and purposely agitate in order to make it seem like the people are really against this, the people hate this, this is really fascist and oppressive, and this, they're always trying to optically make it seem that way, even if it's really not that way.
I think it's a great point. I think you're definitely going to see an activation of Antifa groups especially in places, Portland, Seattle, probably Chicago as well. People
Seattle
forget
for sure.
too that when Kyle Rittenhouse happened, and even though that was Kenosha, they were driven up from Chicago. So that was all groups of people from Chicago that had gone to Kenosha. So there are pretty sizable and well-formed organizations still there. And unfortunately, with the exception of Georgia, which I've actually said, Governor Kemp in Georgia has done a great job of rolling these guys up. And so Georgia's the one example. You're mentioning the NGOs. They actually went after the NGOs. They went after the bundlers when they were going after that Cop City, training center they were talking about. And they rolled up all of these people that were raising money for Antifa. And yes, what a surprise. They were actually finding NGOs, quasi-legal groups that were funding all of it.
Of course.
And so that hasn't been done nationwide.
And the purpose is
you're going to see
for optics, right? And there could be something here, and I'm glad you bring this up, to kind of draw that poison out, right? Another way for us to maybe start following the money back to other NGOs who are funding these types of groups. And yes, the idea here, they are going to try to make it an optical disaster by agitating whoever comes in to enforce law and order, and make it seem like these are fascists. They're here to take your rights and beat you in the streets and things like this, when actually they're agitating the law enforcement, right?
So I agree, Andrew, with your take on it, these mayors and governors being treasonous. And that's a good reason to go into these cities and clean them up. I'm also for tactical strikes against riots, but I am uneasy cheering on military presence in these cities if it's a sustained presence. And because I'm not confident that the right's going to hold power after Trump. And I see these people weaponizing that against us once again, whether it's on J6ers or if there's a quote unquote plague happening and they want to rip you out of your homes. I was in New York in 2020 and they were trying to pass a bill where they could just rip me out of my house, So that's my only problem with something like this, is what they can do with this precedence in the future.
Well, let me ask you a question then. I understand your concern.
Which, I mean, to your point, though, it's not just a precedent that Trump is setting, because they were doing this during COVID, right? So you already had Democrat Governor Tim Walz, was sending around stuff
right.
to enforce these lockdowns, and you can all see videos about this. So
on a state level,
right?
But Biden didn't send out the military to this degree.
He did in D.C.
In D.C., which is, I'm fine with D.C. I have no problem with D.C. because it's D.C.
Well, to just ask you a quick question, Steelman, your position.
I don't disagree with
very,
you.
very,
I'm just
very
saying,
quickly.
I think the precedent is kind of already.
You're saying, hey, look, if the military is deployed, now we have a precedent, possibly against posse comitatus, something like this. And so that could carry over to Democrat administrations, which are then used to oppress you. That's the basic position. My question to you would just be, what could you even think of as an alternative that the president could do from a law enforcement perspective to enforce any of the laws in these places where dozens of people in some cases are murdered daily?
Yeah, I know. I do want these safer cities, but I see it having to happen on a local level and making the people, unfortunately, have to vote for a better mayor like we had in Giuliani.
But it's not happening, and the
we had it
president's
in
job is
Giuliani
to enforce the law.
Right, but we had it with Giuliani in New York City. He did clean up the city after a really bad time.
Yes.
And I was very appreciative of that, despite him sending most of those homeless
Look what
to
they
my
did
neck
to
of the
him.
woods. I know.
They destroyed him, and they stopped, stop, and frisk, and all of that stuff came back.
Yep.
And on top of that, they destroyed him politically after that. So
I just am uncomfortable giving the president that much power in the local communities.
But see what I mean? Like,
unless it's a tactical strike.
I understand the concern, but it doesn't actually answer to the question. What's the alternative? What?
The people voting for a local.
Yeah, but how does the president affect that?
The president should. I'm saying the president should be out. But with this he's in.
So this is the one thing he can do, which is within his power to do. And if these treasonous local officials refuse to enforce the laws because they get stand-down orders from Democrats who are in the pockets of NGOs and everything else we just talked about, what else can he actually do at his disposal to stop that?
Well, yeah, if we can all agree that it is treason, and I think these governors are collapsing these places on purpose because they want to. It's a war against the country.
For sure.
if we can all get along on that, then it is a war. Well, I think we've been in a war without even defining.
Yeah, but we're not going to get along on that, right?
But they have already begun in some cases. When you're talking about the lack of enforcement or refusing to enforce immigration laws, we've already seen indictments against mayors.
Yeah.
And potentially you could see more of that. And I think when it comes down to this immigration law and not just refusal to follow, but even aiding and abetting, if you're someone who's done that, and it's been some smaller cases now, but I think that you could roll that out depending on what's done, right? If someone is to really cross that line.
But these guys are within their authority to do this. They're within their authority to not enforce laws or give more minimum.
But that's what I'm saying. If they cross the line.
Yeah, but where's the line? Like, how many dozens more need to be dead daily before we move to this line? This is what I'm saying is, like, from the president down, the president of the United States, he has access to the soldiers of the United States. He's a commander in chief, okay? And he can deploy them foreign and domestic for whatever threat comes up, for the most part. Even without an act of Congress. What else could he personally actually do? He can't actually do anything.
The framing
else.
of this is kind of ridiculous because they say, oh, Trump is doing this, Trump is sending this, Trump is sending this. It's all Trump focused. Mm-hmm. And even us doing that, what is he dealing with? He's dealing with the crime epidemic that's going on in our country right now. And ICE is dealing with the migrant crisis that is going on in our cities right now, both of which are interrelated for how that works. And so it's amazing, right? So our cities are overflowing. This is causing crime. There's also these transnational narco-terror groups that are involved. In fact, I believe Stephen Miller mentioned earlier this morning in one of the briefings that they've as they've taken more of a look at Washington, D.C., they're even finding a direct... This is going to sound crazy, guys, but did you know that the street gangs in our cities are getting their drugs from drug cartels?
No way.
It's just go with me.
What about
slow down?
Yeah. What about
slow down?
They don't go to the corner store like everyone else?
I know.
Jimmy Dore did a great piece. Everyone should go watch it, whether you like Jimmy Dore or not. He did a great piece on what's going on in D.C. and how they change the category of what crime is to make it look like crime has been going down.
Exactly.
Violent crime when it actually hasn't. And he had it's a great video. You can find it on his channel. I was just reviewing it I think 2 days ago. But what they do is you got to like with crime, it's all definitional, right?
Right.
So you just change the definition, and then you could add percentages to this other definition, which should really go in this other violent category.
Yes.
And through this, they were able to kind of show to the public, well, crime's actually decreasing. Well, violent crime when it's not actually decreasing at all.
Literally the plot of The Wire.
Yeah, and the entire thing is just nonsense. And so the question becomes, again, and this is the one I always come back to, and that I have never gotten a good answer on, because I don't think there is one, right? It's like, no offense to you, there's just not a good answer for this. What do you do if you have treasonous Democrats in charge of these cities and in charge of even these states who refuse to enforce the laws or add new minimums for the purposes of placating, a minority constituency, for the purpose of national PR, other than send in the troops to enforce the law? Our citizens are still suffering there. Our citizens are still getting killed.
And in fact, he is the president of all American citizens.
Yeah.
So he
has an obligation to do this, right? Like, if he doesn't have the obligation, who does?
No, and it's very clear, to your point, Shane, about what Giuliani did in New York, the broken windows, that he's obviously, who was very closely related with Giuliani at the time, that they were working together. He was obviously on the economic side, Giuliani on the law enforcement side, but they turned New York from the taxi driver in New York and Robert De Niro to this like amusement park, and specifically Times Square. And, everybody wants to go, but not that long ago, within living memory for, I would say, most people, it was not like that. And it was like that. And it became that way because
when
of
Anderson
Trump
Cooper's getting
and
kissed on the
Giuliani.
penis by Kathy Griffin.
In Times Square,
yeah,
right?
Well, and you're right. I mean, you're right about that.
And so he's clearly just trying to find a way to do that in every city. It's very clear that played a huge role in his in his upbringing, in his life, and he wants to be able to do that. I think that's obvious.
Well, and I think that you bring up a legitimate concern. It is a legitimate concern. I can foresee how this could possibly come back to bite Republicans in the ass if it's the case that we set the precedent and then they're like, ha, 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 now it's being used
But
on you.
I never want to say let's not do something because, oh, what if the left does
Exactly.
Yeah, to that
because
point,
of
like,
blowback.
yeah.
Well, the thing is, the
It's-
left
you
is
still have
already
to do it.
the left has already proven that they will do things that are outside
care.
of the realm of
they don't
normal.
care.
They do not care about precedent. They do not care about what. They don't even care about what's legal. They were arresting President Trump's his lawyers. So if they don't care, and then your reason to not exercise power when you have it is, oh well, the Dems will. They're going to do it anyways.
Well, come on. Their rhetoric led to Trump almost getting assassinated.
Yeah.
I mean, they
Literally.
literally tried to take him out.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.